you could be as quick as you could.
Thank you, and thank you all for attending. My questions are going to be initially to the Minister and then, if there's time, to the Chief Executive of CSIRO. Minister, referring to the government's change in its 2050 net zero policy, in the 2019 election, the government's opposition to the UN's 2050 net zero carbon dioxide policy gained you many votes and a lot of political traction, and used the policy to Labor's adoption of the policy to really smash the opposition leader Bill Shorten. Just 2 years later, after emphatically, repeatedly and thoroughly criticising Labor and the Greens, there was an unexplained reversal last year, and the government adopted the UN's 2050 net zero carbon dioxide policy. What is the specific change in climate science on which the government's change of policy is based?
Well, thank you. I think to answer that question in detail, I think it'd probably be best for the Environment Minister. But I would simply say that I don't accept the premise of all of what you've said.
What do you disagree with?
Well, you said unexplained. I mean, obviously we went through quite a detailed process. The Prime Minister spoke on a number of occasions about his desire to get to a net zero position if it can be done in a way that protects Australian jobs and continues to see industries thrive, and that's what Minister Taylor worked on. Now, we're not obviously in the space where we have the detail in terms of those portfolios, but it was explained over a period of time. The government made the decision. Obviously, it played out publicly. There was a conversation, I think, with the Australian people, and obviously there was a live debate that you were aware of that the coalition went through, and the government came to a conclusion.
Okay. It wasn't explained in terms of some change in science. There was no references, there's no document, no publications referred to, no specific page numbers of the change in the data or the cause. So there was nothing to change the policy.
Well, as I say, the government was not prepared to commit to such a policy without being able to do the work as to how we would get there and how we would do so in a responsible way. And that was the job that Minister Taylor in particular was tasked with, and that was the work that fed into the government decision. Now, in terms of the detail of the various portfolio parts of that, I think that's probably for another part of estimates, but I think that summarises the government's position.
Well, let's go back a step further. What's the basis of the government's climate policy and ensuing consequent policies on energy, agriculture, manufacturing, social policy, and other aspects that the UN's climate and associated policies impact? What's the overall basis?
Sorry, I might just get you to repeat that question. Sorry.
What is the basis of the government's climate policy and the consequent policies that stumble on from that on energy, agriculture, manufacturing, social policy, and other aspects that the UN's climate and associated policies impact?
Well, look, it's a fairly broad question. I might ask officials if they can assist.
Yeah, so
Ms. Evans.
Very quickly, Joe Evans, Deputy Secretary in the Department, and Senator, the basis is really the globally agreed science on climate change, which is articulated through the International Panel on Climate Change reports.
Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change?
That's the one, yeah.
Okay, thank you. That was nice and quick. Back to the Minister. Cutting human carbon dioxide has had huge costly impacts. Cutting human carbon dioxide output has had huge costly impacts across our society, especially on fundamentals for productivity and prosperity, for example, energy. Surely the only sound basis for policy with such economic consequences is the specific effect of changing human carbon dioxide output. The impact, for example, of a specified change in human output of carbon dioxide, what specific impact would it have on climate factors such as temperature, rainfall, droughts, wind? Then when that is the specific impact, then when the effect is quantified, only then can we do a cost-benefit analysis of the costs of doing that and the benefits that come from that. And significantly, we can't do any measurement of progress as we implement the policy unless we've got that specific impact of carbon dioxide. What is that specific impact of carbon dioxide on various climate factors?
Well, I'm happy for officials to elaborate, but I mean, in terms of what the government's approach has been, it has been to be part of the Paris Agreement, so part of collective action across the world, where we are doing our part, and we've been doing that obviously with our emissions reductions to date, which have been tracking in fact ahead of many comparable OECD nations and many sort of comparable resource-rich nations such as Canada.
So what will be the extra impact of tracking ahead?
But if I can also go to your question, and in the preamble to your question around, you talked about other economic impacts or impacts in relation to higher energy prices and the like. What we've seen under our government in the last few years is actually energy prices coming down year on year and coming down quarter on quarter. So we as a government never look at these issues in isolation. We look at it as part of that collective response and taking our responsibilities to the environment seriously, but never taking our eye off the ball in terms of the need for affordable and reliable energy, for instance, and that's something that we've been delivering, and that's been our track record.
Senator Roberts, we've got to go to the Office of Chief Scientist at 6:25. So I know you did want to ask some questions to the Chief Executive Officer of CSIRO, so I just wanted to
Thank
give
you.
you that chance.
Thank you. So essentially what you're saying, Senator Segelja, is that your answer is the same as the one Senator Cormann gave me repeatedly when I asked questions in the Senate and wrote him letters. That was, we've got to do our part of global agreements.
Well, I mean, I don't know if I'm not aware of exactly what former Minister Cormann.
That's the gist.
Well, as I say, I'll take your word for that.
I can show you his letters.
Sure, I'm not disputing. All I'm saying is I'm not aware of exactly what Minister Cormann told you, but you know, my evidence is the evidence I've just given.
Assuming what I've said to you of Senator Cormann's evidence responses, you're agreeing with it.
Well, look, it's a difficult question to answer without seeing all the detail of what you've said, but I think my evidence speaks for itself.
Okay. Bob Hawke's Labor government first introduced the climate topic in the 80s. Then in 1996, the Howard Anderson Liberal Nationals government first made it policy. On what specific quantified effect did they base that policy? Do you know?
Well, look, I think you're talking about history of before I was in this place, and so I would prefer, without having been involved in those discussions, I'd prefer not to. I don't feel qualified to give you a detailed answer on that.
Are you aware that the Howard Anderson Liberal Nationals government implemented their renewable energy target, that is gutting electricity and industry generally, that they stole farmers' property rights to use their land, and they did that deceitfully going around the Constitution, Section 51, Clause 31, and that John Howard was the first leader of a large party to adopt an emissions trading scheme, which Tony Abbott rightly called a carbon dioxide tax. Are you aware of those major policies that are now still in play? And John Howard actually said that the renewable energy target has gone too far now.
Well, but I certainly wouldn't accept your characterisation of some of those policies in the way you've framed them, and certainly in relation to those fine leaders of our nation that you've sort of characterised their policies in a certain way. So no, I wouldn't agree with that.
So,
okay, thank you.
Sorry, Senator Roberts.
I'm sorry. Just got one thing to follow up.
Well, it's got to be very quick.
It will be very quick. Are you aware that 6 years after being booted from office in 2007, in 2013, John Howard admitted at a global warming skeptics annual address in London that on climate science he was agnostic, yet he introduced these policies?
No, I wasn't aware of that. But,
I can show you that.
But I am.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Senator.